Hello and welcome to your daily mobile game sizzle with me, Jon Jordan. Today we are looking at Nintendo Switch, so sort of a mobile game device in a way, a handheld device, and we've got some graphs to couch our predictions on where it might end up. So this first one is a historic look at home console sales. So we can see here along the bottom it's time, and along the top it is global sales in millions. So right at the start, obviously Nintendo kind of create the home console industry, at least after the Atari era. So we have the NES and the SNES, both selling over 50 million units. We go along the timeline a little bit, and then we have PlayStation, the first PlayStation 1, selling over 100 million units, so pretty successful. Nintendo's N64 came out a bit later, not as successful, 33 million units. So actually we can see there's a kind of a trend of decline really that continues. Next console to come out is the GameCube. GameCube only sells 22 million units. What else is happening? Obviously PlayStation 2 has come out. PlayStation 2 has sold over 150 million units, the most successful home console ever by quite a long way. Obviously that had an impact on GameCube. The other thing that kind of happened was the first Xbox came out. It sold a bit more than the GameCube, so I guess we call that successful for Microsoft for a first attempt. Then it gets kind of interesting. 2005, the Xbox 360 comes out, a market improvement on the first Xbox. Almost sells as many as PlayStation 3, they're both about 85 million. And then what's that? Nintendo finally has a big home console hit, the Wii. So that's 100 million units for the Wii, just over 102 million units. So very successful, by far Nintendo's most successful home console. And then we get to the current generation, I suppose. So Nintendo Wii U, which isn't its current console now, it's been discontinued. Total disaster, sold 14 million units, right down the bottom, Nintendo's worst selling home console. Still have PlayStation 4 and Xbox One are still being sold, so they're in yellow. Xbox One doing okay, I suppose. Not looking like it's going to hit the 360 numbers, but about 30 million, just under 30 million units there. And PlayStation 4 doing super well, over 50 million units. So as we can see in the headline there, every single PlayStation has sold over 50 million units. I imagine PlayStation 4 will probably sell a bit more than PlayStation 3. So most of them have sold over 75 million units. Only two Nintendo home consoles have sold over 50 million units. The first one, the NES, which is quite historic now. It was really the only console in the market at that point, so we can't maybe draw too much from that. And the Wii. So Wii is the big, interesting kind of anchor point for lots of discussion about how Switch will do. So let's go in and take a bit more of a detailed look at Nintendo consoles, home consoles, and handheld consoles. So in this graph, we're looking at Nintendo's home consoles and Nintendo's handheld consoles. So they are two quite distinct hardware types with quite distinct demographics, obviously different pricing and obviously different lifetime. So there's a kind of you don't want to draw conclusions from one to the other. As we saw before, we had the NES and the SNES coming out, first two home consoles. In between them, we have the Game Boy. So Game Boy, very successful, sold well over 100 million units globally. So it went through different revisions. That's the graphic we're showing there is of the first one. So while the home console sales were declining, down to Game Boy there, we have the GBA. So GBA was the replacement to Game Boy, and sold pretty well. Sold getting on for over 85 million units. And then we have the kind of the high point of Nintendo, which actually labeled these the wrong way around, but we have the Wii, which was about 100 million unit sales, and we have the DS, which was over 150 million units. So 2009 was the peak of Nintendo in terms of its financial revenues. And then we move down to the next generation, and we have the poor old Wii U languishing at the bottom there with its 14 million sales, way down, the worst performing home console ever. And at the moment we have the 3DS. So 3DS is in yellow because it's still in production. And it's hard to say. I mean, it's not a failure. Clearly, it's not a success on the level of the other units yet. Looks like you'll probably lifetime-wise outsell Game Boy Advance. Obviously, it's a more expensive unit as well. Gone through different revisions, so there's different price points on those as well. But clearly, there's been some sort of impact there when it comes to mobile phones. probably less of an impact than people think, actually. The 3DS is sort of surprised in how well it's sold. But the general trend to look at, I think, from this graph is that the handheld units obviously are cheaper, they are produced for longer, and they sell better than the home consoles. Home consoles, with the exception of Wii, which was I see as an outlier in terms of its success. Hard to replicate that kind of phenomenon where you're bringing a totally new experience of gaming, particularly kind of social family gaming, to people who wouldn't really call themselves gamers. You know, the whole traditional anecdotal Wii bought for Christmas, played during Christmas week, and then not brought out again until the following Christmas. You know, that was reaching a demographic of people who didn't call themselves gamers. So the interesting thing with Switch, which is obviously a hybrid console, it can work as a home console, it can work as a handheld console. It's not 100% either one or the other. Is what is the kind of user case? How will it be used? I think you see one very definite trend if it is predominantly used as a home console. There's you would see kind of 50 million sales as being maybe an upper limit for it, really. If it's used mainly as a handheld console, you see maybe 100 million units as a kind of a ceiling for it. Probably somewhere in the middle, I would imagine, as these things tend to be. But it's quite interesting, I think. Whether Nintendo know how they want it to be used, it's hard to say. I would think, and anecdotally again, lots of people seem to be using it in much more in a handheld mode. Obviously, gamers will probably already have a what we might call a high-powered console, or PlayStation 4 or a Xbox One attached to their TV. The Wii, in comparison, may get the odd look in when a certain game comes out, when a Zelda or a Mario Kart 8, that may then kind of spring into action, but probably not on a day-to-day level for most people. So thus, it probably is the moment we think it tilting more towards a handheld portable usage case, which is actually quite good for Nintendo, because it that potentially means it's not competing with those other big consoles, and it's certainly not competing with mobile games, in the sense of the games that you're playing on it are very, very different. The console games on the go, potentially building up a new market there. A final graph which highlights again the difference between home console use and handheld console use, and that's looking at tie ratio. So that's the number of software units sold for hardware units, so effectively games per console. So we can see here there's a very basic blue line, and all the home consoles are beneath that blue line, and all the handheld consoles are above that line. So basically, all it's saying is the number of games sold per home console sale is higher. The further they are away from the line, the kind of bigger the tie ratio. So actually, lots of people think Wii had a very weak tie ratio, because it was assumed that it would go through this. You have one game for it. You have Wii Sport or maybe one other, and that's all you play. Actually, not the case. Wii software sales were very good, obviously, because it had a big install base. Lots of third-party publishers released games for it, and maybe the price point was lower than some of the kind of PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 games, but the actual tie ratio was actually very good on the Wii. And even Wii U didn't sell a lot of hardware units, but the actual tie ratio was pretty good, even better than the N64. Above the line, we have the handheld devices, and we can see here that the tie ratio is just lower. You could argue how significant that is. Well, actually, it can be quite significant in the sense that obviously you're selling less hardware per you're selling less software per hardware sale. Most of your profit is made on software sales. If you have a big successful console, it doesn't really matter, but it's just kind of pointing out that if Switch could sell 50 million units, but actually Nintendo over the lifetime would probably not make so much money as potentially some analysts might think, just because the software sales potentially wouldn't be so high. Equally, there could be another argument that because it is this hybrid, maybe it will be used as a handheld device, but actually its tie ratio will be more like a home console. I mean, obviously this is all slight conjecture, but this graph, I think it's interesting just to point out that historically there is this kind of difference. Whether Nintendo's kind of approach with this hybridized home handheld console really hits the sweet spot, which is the unit sales of a handheld device and the software sales of a home console. I mean, that's really what they're expecting. We wait and see. For me, my gut feeling is 50 million sales will be a success for it. Anything under 20 million, clearly not a success. We wait and see. We'll get the first idea from Nintendo's earnings report on the 27th of April. So pretty soon we'll get the first, that'll be the first month's sales of Switch, and we'll be able to make some predictions from that point onwards. So thanks for watching. This is your daily mobile game sizzle. Don't forget to subscribe and learn out what's going on in the world of mobile games. Hope to see you soon. Hi, and thanks for watching right to the end of the video. We always like to see your comments, so please put them in the comments section below. And don't forget to subscribe. And check out some more of our other videos about the mobile games industry. There's 2 really good examples on your screen right now.